All right. Good morning, everybody. Thank you so much for joining us for today's episode of our AVT Tech Talk series. Today, we have LiveU and NewTek joining us to discuss end-to-end IP sports production workflows. So my name is Ashley Buettner. I'm with Applied Video, and I'm happy to be joined by Scott Sheehan from LiveU and Chris Burgos and Jeremy Morris from NewTek. They'll be leading the discussion today. We will be recording the webinar for you to view later, and of course, feel free to submit any questions at any time, and we'll do our best to get them answered. So before we get started, I do just want to give a brief background for AVT, for those of you who aren't familiar with our company. So bear with me one second here while I share my screen. All right, so we AVT is celebrating our 25th year of business this year. So we opened in 1996. We're a certified small business, women-owned. You can see our list of certifications here on the screen. So we're located in Kimberton, Pennsylvania, which is just outside of Philadelphia. Here's just a list of the markets that we serve. I know today's presentation is primarily around sports production workflows, but we do work with education, K through 12 and higher education, corporate, house of worship, government, and broadcast and production. So we are a full audiovisual system integration company. And then just a little bit about us and our partnerships with our vendors today. We are a NewTek Platinum partner and a LiveU partner. We're NewTek certified, and we have certified trainers and demo artists on staff for here at AVT. So we can do demos in person or online demos for you, as well as work with you from start to finish on the system design and installation to integrate the different technology that meets your needs for the different applications that you may need. Like I said, we also have a full staff of training and support staff here at AVT for both commissioning and on-site, as well as after the fact, we can do training and we can provide staff to come on site to help you get the most out of your investment. So we do build studio facilities from start to finish. Here's just a few pictures of some of our final, some of the work that we've done. These are mostly a higher ed here, as well as some mobile production and trucks for some of our customers that have gone out and used these for sports and mobile productions for both live and on-demand viewing. So just a quick background on some of the stuff that we do. So at this time, I do want to hand the presentation over to Scott from LiveU. And like I said, feel free to submit any questions that you have. We'll be monitoring the chat and try to answer those throughout. And then Scott will hand it over to the guys from NewTek, and we'll take it from there. So Scott, thanks so much for joining us today.
Hey, thank you, Ashley. Welcome, everyone. I want to thank Ashley and the team from Applied Video for having us today, and happy to be working with our good friends from NewTek, which we often do together because we seem to play in the same field, so to speak, since we're talking sports. I'm kind of come to you from Citi Field in New York, obviously from a couple of years ago. But I live in Colorado. LiveU is based in New Jersey, but I grew up in upstate New York, up in the Saratoga region, so I am a Mets fan. So just getting that out there right away. So I'm going to talk to you. I know that the guys from NewTek got some really cool stuff that they want to talk about, some new products that they're bringing to the table to help with your video production. I'm going to talk about pretty much the same thing when it comes to what we'll call live remote production. So with that said, I'm going to jump right into live remote production and today's AVT Tech Talk. A little bit about us very quickly. But we are the experts in live video solutions when it comes to, and an industry leader, in changing the rules of the game, innovating, doing all the things around making live remote production a reality in all sorts of markets: broadcast, sports, government, military, education, house of worship, corporate, etc. We get, I guess, credit for, and rightfully so, with our patents and having founded and discovered, or whatever you want to call it, bonded cellular technology. But it's really evolved into live video using IP, and then innovating around all of that, taking advantage of an infrastructure that's growing, now into 5G. But we really do transport video, HD, 4K, over cellular, Wi-Fi, internet, whatever it takes, and then put a whole bunch of solutions around that. Just some numbers at the bottom to give you a little bit of a feel for what makes us the industry leader. Each one of these categories has its own slide, but to make this go a little quicker, a who's who in the world of broadcast, sports, education, corporate, and military government installations. So you got kind of the logo slide, so to speak, that we get to brag about. Like I say, it's hundreds of different customers across all of these segments. A couple quick pictures to really bring it into reality. Okay, so what you see here is live view equipment at Fort Myers, Red Sox. And what they used to do, because what you don't see here is the SAT truck, because it's not there. What you don't see here is the switcher and the router and the graphics and the replay machine and all that stuff, because that's all back in Boston. So what LiveView is doing with Live Remote is just sending down the camera operators. In this particular case, you see some LU600s unpacked, photographed here, a producer and an engineer. And they're sending, those folks down there, putting just the cameras and all that stuff, transporting it back, over IP, primarily bonded cellular, so they can stay untethered, and producing the entire show back from Boston. The result, more viewers, 75% cost savings. Here's another example. Again, what you see here is a whole bunch of people standing in a manufacturing floor at Toyota. And what you don't see here, again, is the switcher and the output and all of that, because that's down in Dallas, Texas, where Toyota has their headquarters. And what they're doing is they're going through a plant, because they got 9 of these across the United States and Canada, and they're putting all of these cameras in place so that they can go do a manufacturing tour plant and bring all that video to the other 8 plants across North America. And the executives, the quality control people, whoever wants to be a part of this tour can essentially be watching and actually have an interactive tour. So just a couple of real life examples, sports and corporate in this particular case, of how LiveView is being put into play to essentially go live and be remote. So here's again, I talked about it at the top. We invented the bonded technology. It's really woven into something we call LiveView Reliable Transport, because it's more than just taking video and grabbing a whole bunch of cellular connections, and what we do is we actually create packets, and these packets travel over the different carrier connections that we're making, and then they get reordered and put back together. But also what's going on is along with that packet ordering is forward error correction, you've got adaptive bitrate following, you've got a lot of math, as I like to call it, that's going on with the video, including the HEVC encoding, to basically bring a reliable, high quality video, which we couldn't be where we are today if it wasn't reliable and high quality. With all the broadcasters and these major sports stations, the logos that you saw on the front of the page, and it's essentially proven that reliability, and that's where we get our high marks. So in the Toyota factory, in the Fort Myers, I call it mini Fenway Park down there in Fort Myers, you've got the encoder, and then you're transporting. What you didn't see, again, is what's going on in the other locations. That's where the decode is taking place. And that could be a physical server to receive the signal, put those packets back together, you know, decode the HEVC and output it for production. All right, so you got the decode, the production and play out, the replay, all the stuff that's going on, you know, in anybody's studio to bring all the pieces back together and play it out. A little bit about our product line, and I'm not going to get too deeply into this, but it is the greatest depth and breadth of product line, you know, in our category. Another thing that makes us the leader in the industry. The 800 at the top, we're going to talk a little bit more about here in a moment, is our latest and greatest, now supporting 5G in 4K. We're going to talk a little bit about that, but you can see a whole lineup of encoders to the left, including at the bottom something we call LU Smart, which is a phone app, which is a great addition to the workflow. The decoders, and there's also some contribution encoder. We call them contribution encoders, but they're really rack mount or encoders that might be in a truck or might be in a fixed facility for encoding and moving equipment or moving video from point A to point B. The decoders, and then really on the far right is the pieces, and I'll show a couple of pictures without getting into too much depth, but the pieces of what make remote possible. I can't be in one place and have the production going on in another place if I can't communicate between the two places. So what the innovation and the column on the right do is they bring video back to. So we have something called video return, bringing video back to that producer in the field as confidence monitor. So, you know, it gets produced in Boston, and the producer needs to see what that final output looks like because he's doing a multi-camera shoot. So you send a video back to the field for confidence monitor. In a news or some other type of a situation, you might send teleprompter back to the field so that the person in the field can get the teleprompter video. But you also got to be communicating over audio. So we've got intercom, two-way audio communications, a sidebar, in addition to the audio, you know, 4 channels of audio that are coming in embedded on the SDI. Tally light. And now the latest innovation we've got is something called IP pipe. So now I can literally put PTZ cameras on my 300, 600, or 800 and put a PTZ camera there and not even have a camera operator, and I can drive that from the studio. So I have this ability to control cameras, have audio communication, have video return, have tally light, and have all of the things in the field as if I was in the studio. So encoders, decoders, which by the way, a couple of physical decoders, so you can have SDI or NDI out, but there's also a cloud decoder that if you just want to go to a CDN, you can hit a cloud decoder and then take an RTMP feed to your favorite online source. So here's a picture of what we would do with independent feeds. You got 4 cameras. You might have a mix of 300s and 600s. They might be all 600s, 300s, 800s, whatever. Cameras, and essentially bringing all that video back in sync, 800 milliseconds from lens to switcher, and, you know, essentially be producing someplace else. As I said before, sending video return back to the field and having this communication to be able to produce, in this particular case, a sporting event remotely. What we've done with the 800, we like to call changing the rules of the game, pun intended, for the sports world. But in this particular case now with the 800, I could put all 4 of those cameras on one box. And I could carry all 4 HD feeds or a single 4K feed back to the studio and have all those same you know, abilities to, you know, do IP pipe and control the cameras. You don't see PTZs here, but just envision those could be PTZ cameras and controlling all that from the studio. 10-bit HD HDR. So if it is 4K or, you know, even in HD, if you want to enhance your production and you need that high color, it's got 10-bit HD HDR. So the 800 is the first multi-camera unit that allows you to bring those feeds back. Now, the difference between the previous slide and this slide is independent feeds where you have that freedom to move about the event, where in this particular case, you would need to be able to reach the LU800 with all of your camera inputs. Here's a picture of it again. I talked about the PTZ camera. In this case, we just happen to show kind of a field panel event, but this could be a corporate event or anything else. It could be a sporting event. But again, talking about IP pipe, this is where you could potentially go out. I got a guy doing MMA, and they're using an LU800. They got 4 PTZ cameras because it is a smaller event, a smaller platform. And they can put the PTZ cameras around. They still can't have a lot of crowds. They still can't have a lot of people at these events, and they can drive and control the entire event, including the cameras, with less people on site, and save more cost. You see this thing called precision timing. It plays into the 800, but it also plays into all those independent cameras. So everything reaches back to the server all in sync, which obviously for sports, you couldn't do this properly without everything being in sync. And you see the very low delay down to 800 milliseconds. The audio feed going back and forth, I talked about intercom, is 200 milliseconds. So your audio back and forth is, for your sidebar communication, it's pretty much real time. And there's a couple multi-camera modes for that LU800. So in this case, 4 cameras, 4 independent feeds, all getting carried back, 4 ISOs, back to the switcher, TriCaster, and you switch it back there. The second way you can do it, depending upon your bandwidth, because each one of those HD signals is coming back, at 4.2 megabits per second. So you got a lot of bandwidth that you're carrying back, which typically you've got enough to do it. But you could actually switch the camera feeds on the LU800. You're looking at 4 preview screens back at your production facility, and you say, just give me camera 1, give me camera 2, give me camera 3, and we'll just give you the one feed that you asked for, so you could actually be doing some remote switching in the field. You might do this when your only output, your final output is a CDN. So you can actually do this from the 800 and actually hit a cloud server where the single RTMP feed is going to YouTube Live or Facebook Live or something like that, and therefore you're only sending the one feed. So it's called field switcher mode or multi-feed mode. Again, coming back to what we see a lot of, especially in larger events, is just a reminder of the untethered mode, as I like to call it, where you're coming back to a TV station, a production room, home studio, or whatever it may be, and bringing all those independent feeds back and putting them in, decoding them, putting them in the switcher, doing your graphics, doing your replay, doing all that stuff at the studio. This is the more common use of live remote video. 4K, and I think you're going to hear a little bit more about 4K from my colleagues, but the LiveView LU800 supports 4K. It's set up to take a single 12G on one of the inputs, but if you do happen to have a camera that's 4x3G, because there's 4 SDI inputs there for your HD feeds, you can go 4x3G into the LU800 and carry 4K back. I talked about HDR, 10-bit HDR, 16 audio channels. So every one of the feeds has 4 audio channels coming back. Bring a little bit of a picture of how you might see the audio connect, which is the 2-way intercom being used. On the 800, we've actually got 2 connections, mini jack, so that in this particular case, the sports reporter, the field reporter, whatever she may be doing here, she can have in her earpiece and be listening to the studio, and having a 2-way communication with the host. The cameraman's also got a separate feed, and he's listening to the director or the TD or somebody who's basically saying, giving him or her instructions. In this particular case, you see up at the top, the tally light. So we're going, it's green. That says, okay, we're live, we're transmitting. But then when the switcher says camera 1, camera 2 going live, it'll turn red and she knows that she's on the air. Video return, we talked a little bit about it before. There it is. She's got her confidence monitor, or that could be, teleprompter coming back. So you got all the tools: audio, video, tally, and in this particular case, IP pipe not necessarily being used, but you get the idea. The other thing you could do with the 800, the 600, and the 300, something we call data bridge mode. We are modems after all. So at the end of the day, if you need to send data, you can use our modems for data. What the 300 and the 600, the products prior to the 800, you got to do one or the other. All right. So you might be all done with the production. You might be, editing or doing something or whatever. You got to get some files exchanged. Whatever you got to do, you can put it in data bridge mode and use your device as a data transport. With the 800, you can actually do them at the same time. And I think of a corporate environment where I'm doing, a sales whatever meeting, big sales meeting for Dell or something like that. And while the production crew is sitting back at the back table doing all their audio and video, whatever, but they're taking all this video, taking all the feeds, sending it to other Dell locations so everybody can participate. Ooh, we got to get a new PowerPoint update. I can be doing that actually over the data bridge at the same time while I'm still going live with the video. And I use Dell because, they are a classic user. You might be in a hotel somewhere where getting an internet feed is either expensive or just not reliable. So this is getting used a lot in those corporate event environments where they have to go to a hotel or a convention center or something like that, and LiveView comes into play. A bit more about the 800. We talked about on the left, bonded technology, LRT. We're bringing all that forward, but we're now bringing in 5G. So as the industry moves forward, this is the first in this line in the industry to have embedded 5G modems, and we are shipping those today. We're talking about sports. I think sports environments are probably going to be one of the first places where you'll see good, effective use of 5G. Verizon, AT&T, T-Mobile are putting a lot into the obviously the major sports venues, but you'll start to see it, as it grows. It's going to take 4 or 5 years really for the whole back end infrastructure of 5G to be fully ubiquitous. The modems do support 4G and 3G, so you can still continue to run, with what you've got available as far as transport. And the other thing that iView brings to the table, we control all of this through a browser-based application we call LiveView Central. Here's my encoders, here's my decoders. I'm directing traffic, sending feeds. Within that environment, there's other tools, and one of them is file transfer. So if I've got an event, I can go live, but simultaneously store that video because I'm going to repurpose it. This is either B-roll later on or something that I'm going to repurpose later. So I can go live and store, and then with our with our transport mechanism that we have, we've got a file transport that sends it back to the server. So it goes from the LU800 or the 600 back to the server in the studio. It's that server. It's like a big cache, 1 terabyte of cache, and then you can move it off into your media asset management system. And we're essentially doing this. I don't know if we want to compare ourselves to the public hotel Wi-Fi, but if you do, it's 100 times faster. So it's just a really cool way to get your B-roll, potential B-roll back. I'm going to stop there, and I want to turn it over to the guys from NewTek because I know they got some exciting things to talk about. But just did want to give you visit the LiveView booth. I'm sorry, this is a holdover slide from a virtual trade show that we did. But if you do want to visit our booth, go ahead. But that's it for now until we get maybe to some Q&A stuff later. Ashley, thank you.
Scott, I did just want to, it looks like we had 2 questions come in over the chat for you. So I thought that I would just see if we could get those answered here real quickly.
Okay, I'll work
Let me
backwards
see
here.
here. So the first one, the LU800 work over bonded cellular, or does it have to use fiber? And what exactly does LRT stand for?
So starting from the LU800, yes, it works over bonded cellular. But really, all of our devices do, it's all of those connections that we talked about. It's bonded cellular, Wi-Fi, or internet. If you do have internet, I know you saw my slide that talked about 800 milliseconds delay from lens to switcher. Actually, on internet, we can get it down to 600 milliseconds delay. So, but yeah, bonded cellular, like I said before, is the thing that makes us famous because it allows you to go anywhere at any time and bring video to anybody and everybody from multiple places. LRT stands for Live View Reliable Transport. And those are all the pieces that I talked about. Creating the bonded cellular, packet ordering, forward error correction, and adaptive bitrate following. So it's the combination of bonding video over multiple IP connections, whether they're cellular, Wi-Fi, or internet, and then putting all those pieces back together, but in the process of transporting them, doing the math and all of the stuff to make sure that when it gets to the other end, we've got a real high quality video.
Perfect. All right. Yep. That looks like those are the only questions that came in, except for one about if this will be recorded. And yes, this will be recorded, and we will share that recording as soon as it's ready afterwards. So I guess, Scott, I think at this point we'll hand over to Chris and Jeremy from NewTek.
Welcome, Chris. Welcome, Jeremy. I'm going to go dark.
Me too. All right. Thanks, guys.
Thanks, Scott.
Thanks, Scott, man. It was a great conversation about where a lot of this production stuff has gone in terms of how do you cover sports productions. And I think Jeremy and I are going to have to touch on a lot of different things here. We want to talk to you guys about the 3Play 2. This is going to be a very interactive conversation. I think we have a very light amount of things prepared insofar as like assets, but we want to drive a conversation about feature sets and questions. And so I'm going to start with just, anyone who's unfamiliar with the 3Play product line, it's a replay product that we use for sports production. And if you have used a 3Play, we can talk about sort of the highlight features of the 3Play 2. If you're familiar with 3Play, we can sort of go through and give a full feature set conversation. And I think, Jeremy, you're going to pull up some assets we may have had, but in general, we have a couple of things we want to discuss.
Yeah, so the first thing, obviously, to segue from what Scott was talking about from a signal acquisition standpoint, how we're able to take the signals from the field, wherever they're coming from, bring them back into the TriCaster for production value, and then be able to send them back out for rebroadcast. LiveView does have the NDI built into their servers, so now we can take the NDI aspect of the production, use that across the networks. Now the servers can pretty much be wherever they want to, as well as the remote sources can be wherever they want to. We can just network them together. And then the TriCaster can then take all those signals, mix them back out, restream for broadcast, remix them however you want to, clean feed graphics, and then we tie that in with our replay system. So that was what Chris was going to touch on. The 3Play 2 was just announced. It's brand new. We will have a more detailed video on operation on newtek.tv coming up here on May 19th. So please watch for that. But we want to talk about the opportunities with existing replays. I know Chris was touching on the feature sets of the 3P2, but what you're currently seeing in the world of replay from NewTek in the past with our 425s, the 4800s, several products that are currently in the field. How can we then talk about upgrading that? The 3P2 has 8 inputs. That is key for those 8 sources that people have had in the 4800 for a long time. 3P1 only had 4. So now we see that transition that if you want to get back to 8 channels, we can fully support that. Chris does have one slide about I/O. We can talk about connectivity, but for the most part, we want to hear from you guys. What are you currently dealing with? How would you want to see replay enhanced or other types of sports production? Because obviously all of our products that NewTek has can deal with sports production and wide variety of applications, from cameras being at one field and switcher being back at a different location, or the fact that we can remote everything. That's how we can tie in with LiveView pretty well. So please hit up the chat, add a lot of content there for us to talk about, and we can continue the conversation. So Chris, if you want to just touch on the highlights, the information right now is available on our website, newtek.com, where you can actually see, the 3P2, the initial product launch of the highlights, what we're going to talk about, the 4K capability, the 2 outputs. So it's a 10-channel system altogether. You're talking about 8 sources that are coming in a variety of flavors of SDI, NDI, and resolutions. We can also mix and match. So it's also a good way to start with what you have existing and then be able to upconvert as you come along with adding more cameras to the system. So whether it's 4K, whether or not it's coming in from a LiveView system, we can bring that in as an NDI source. Now you can add replay to remote and local at the same time. So not everything has to be hardwired at the facility. You can bring in, cameras that are on the field, on the sidelines, multiple stadiums. If you're talking about a large sports complex with multiple games going on, tennis events, Little League baseball, where you've got several different fields, you can bring content in that way as well. So there's a lot of different ways we can tackle sports production with NewTek products.
Yeah, the 4K aspect for the 3P2, I think it's a big thing to talk about. It is an 8-channel 4K replay device that is relatively unheard of in this sort of space, and we've pushed forward with NDI capacity to do this. So I think we encounter 4K in a lot of different ways. I think you made a great point, Jeremy. I would assume most of your sports productions currently don't have 4K in them, and so that means that 4K acquisition is not currently on the roadmap, but you currently have SDI-enabled products. So hey, the 3P2 has SDI connectors in it. But as you guys expand and grow, and as these sports productions get more and more varied, the opportunity to do things in IP are large. And we have Spark converters. We have a Spark converter that is 4K HDMI. We have a Spark converter that's 3G SDI. And we also have a Spark converter that is 12G SDI. And so all of those product mixes sort of allow us to say, well, however you grow your production in sports or esports or what have you, there will be an IP pathway into the 3P2. And because the 3P2 is an 8-channel system, it's a great starting point for this sort of expansion. And so as you're looking into growing and expanding your replay functions, 3P2 is going to make a big difference. It says, can we upscale a 1080 IP stream into a 4K output without pixelation? So if this is a question for the NewTek guys, we do a lot of this stuff in NDI consistently. We are constantly mixing and matching IP feeds. The beauty of NDI is that we sort of take care of everything in the IP stream, and we're not necessarily doing anything too crazy on the switch, or in this case, the replay side. So yeah, you could mix and match a 1080 and a 4K. And actually, this will bring us up to one of the cool points that we have. A brand new feature for 3P2 is playback zoom and tracking. And so with those 4K workflows, as they're going to be sort of on the new and emerging field, we have the ability to take a 4K input and actually go into a given region of interest and give a specific region for that playback. So instead of doing your traditional playback where you just give you the whole field, if you're working with 4K devices and you want to maybe work at a 1080 or still in 4K but do the pan and scan, or in our case zoom and tracking, you can do that in the replay itself. So we can sort of set the frames to do the slow-mo and also give the sort of zoom in and zoom out of a given, let's say, quadrant or region of interest in the field. So a good question by Aaron. And that is one of the features exclusive to the 3P2 is playback zoom and tracking.
So yeah, think about that application. If you're talking about a smaller school that may need official replay without having to buy a separate system, now we have the capabilities of doing that zoom in on the region of interest from the video to be used for official review. That is something that is kind of unique in a lot of the market space, as well as the price point. You're talking about having a 8-channel replay box that's an MSRP for $25,000. That's eye-opening. That's changing the game substantially here. The capabilities that are built into the product usually would require multiple systems to pull off. Now we're able to do it inside one box. So yeah, so the zoom and tracking is a very cool feature. We've also added playlist sharing. So now you can take a playlist off a replay system, send that over into a DDR of a TriCaster for playback. Now you've got that built-in playlist. So now you can then save that playlist, use it as a highlight reel, because you're not just talking about regular production for broadcast. You also have to think about replay for in-stadium experience.
Yeah.
That usually is a completely different animal. Chris and I both have done this, freelance work and things of that nature, where your approach to the broadcast is going to be different for in-stadium experience. Replay usually gets a lot more attention inside the stadium than it does for the actual broadcast, because the crowd wants to see what's going on right there, or you're playing back highlight reels at timeouts or halftime clips, things like that, where the broadcast guys don't really play with too much. It's like usually a one and done. Yeah, we hit that up, we're moving on. Where the in-stadium usually becomes more key. Also, when you're talking about taking that information and using it later, if you've got a post-game show, if you've got something else, you already have that content. You don't have to worry about re-editing everything, having that highlight reel for the game when the game's moving too fast. You have that playlist. It's now being sent over into the DDR of the TriCaster to be used whenever, live, post, save it for a later game, a coach's show afterwards. A lot more capabilities are available now with the 3P2 and the TriCaster ecosystem.
Yeah, the shareable playlist, Jeremy, is going to be a big feature set that I think people are going to use way more than they think. If you're working within TriCaster today, the fact that you have multiple bins and different places to store your media and your DDR is great. Now working with your 3Play operator means that they can just literally make a playlist shareable. Then you can import that playlist into your DDR setup. And to Jeremy's point, there's different in that full sports experience and that full in-arena and broadcast experience. You have different masters you're trying to serve, right? We have to keep the people in stadium continually entertained, while we're also having the broadcast, which has its commercial breaks. It's sort of built in these sort of like spaces where we could say, okay, hey, let's get that last clip to bump out to commercial. Well, we can do that off the 3Play, but the 3Play operator could just offload a couple of clips to the TriCaster op, your TD. Your TD can control that whole workflow, and then the replay operator is just constantly mixing clips for the in-stadium experience.
Mm-hmm.
And the ability to really quickly do that is going to be important. Also, as we expand into, a lot of colleges and a lot of high-end workflows, we see this at the highest levels of NFL, right? Where we have multiple replay operators and we're all contributing to this greater production. The ability to offload that playlist and just have one operator start working on a new set of projects is amazing, especially if we're building, like, let's say a halftime highlight reel or something that's going to bump out to the end of the game. The ability to say, hey, look, this is some of the content we're going to be using, and have that, give that a once over, and then they can still do more work on their side, or you have a piece of content ready to go. A lot of 3Play operation in the field is done with limited teams. And, we want to make sure that every team member is doing as much as they possibly can. You and I have done field work, as you said, Jeremy. You wear a lot of hats sometimes in the field, and the ability to say, hey, look, I've given you this piece of content. All you have to do is hit play, and I can continue going forward, whether that's a bump out to the end of the commercial, whether that's end of the half, or at the end of the game highlight reel. The fact that this person can sort of say, hey, here's that content, and I'm going to start working on something else. It's a cool little piece of tech that's built into the 3P2, again, exclusive to the 3P2 we're talking about, that is going to be really viable and flexible. And I think going along with this, I think about the number of times I've been operating a 3Play in the trucks, and a lot of these environments are operated by college students. It's operated by guys who are doing multiple games in a given week, and you're going to have a lot of replay content that builds up in your system, just a ton of clips, and that storage is going to be sort of this behemoth to manage. I joke with you, Jeremy, that almost in every 3Play truck, there were guys just boxes full of drives.
Mm-hmm.
That they were just constantly swapping in and out, and okay, this thing's filled up, right? We have to hold that for a month or whatever. Well, the 3P2 has a brand new automatic session cleanup that it can do. And this is another point to the sort of easing the production workflow, doing it better with 3P2 is we can now set times or days where, hey, you know what? We don't do replay. We don't do shows Monday and Wednesday. Every other day of the week, we do sports, whatever our sports schedule is. But Monday and Wednesday, we don't. And so on those days, the 3Play will automatically start to do a session reduction where it's going to get rid of old clips and export content that no longer be there, delete unprotected sessions. It's really going to give you the ability to manage your data at an easy level, especially if you're running a program, right? If you're in a college environment or a high school environment where you have a lot of students going involved, you want them to be able to use the technology because that's how they're going to learn with it. And this automatic session cleanup is going to be a huge boon because you can just say, hey, you know what? At the end of every week, every Friday at 1 p.m., go through and just scrub some of that content out so that we have some drive space available. Because it is a real factor that happens in the field a lot. You're going to be taking a lot of clips. And then that, with that session cleanup in mind, talking about drives getting full and all that data, the last thing we want to talk about is the interconnectivity with the NRS ecosystem. And so the fact that you can have recordings going to a long-term storage solution for all kinds of things going on that's networked, whether that be you want to pull clips up in the future, you want to just have some extra storage for your shows, you need to be interconnecting multiple NDI systems. There's a lot of reasons why an NRS is beautiful, but now the 3P2 does have the functionality to record to the NRS. And so this is a full style workflow that gets deep into the NDI weeds, and maybe not a question, maybe not a topic for here, but just definitely something to consider where if you guys start to have a TriCaster, let's say a TC2, you're looking at a 3P2, maybe you have a couple of other NDI enabled products, whether they're ours or third party market, you're going to look at all this stuff and say, well, what if I want to record all of this? And now we can have the NRS be part of this whole solution. So 3P2 and NRS do have some cool interconnectivity. And as we're talking about how to make your life easier, you know, all of this stuff being IP connected, all this stuff leveraging NDI is certainly going to help that.
So do we have any other questions pop up in chat or workflow discussions or things you want to hit up?
Can you use the replay unit as a real-time broadcast delay? The answer is yes.
Uh-huh.
So yeah, you can dial back on the jog shuttle, and you will be good to go with the 3P2. It does sort of have the control surface is pretty straightforward. It does have a cool tagging feature. If you've never seen a 3Play in action, one of the coolest things we have is the tags. You can convert numerical codes into tags really quickly, so operators can really snappily say, okay, this clip was this player doing this play, and sort of manage that bulk of media. And then similarly, the controller has a jog wheel that you could just, at the start of the game, you can just roll it back a second, and then whenever you're ready to go, hit play and just play those channels out, delayed as, you know, however deep that delay is going to be. And so the switching could happen live, and you could have like a 3-minute delay or something greater if you were working in a non-traditional sports environment.
So one thing, a topic that I want to circle back to that Chris had mentioned before, when we talk about adding our Sparks to the ecosystem, the Spark converter boxes are really the Swiss Army knife in a lot of applications. When you have hybrid systems or legacy gear, cameras that you just don't want to get rid of because you don't have the funding to buy a whole new cameras, that is a great way to scale out your production a lot quicker than just buying all new hardware and cabling for that matter as well. Because if you're doing everything with a network, now you're adding different parts and pieces at different times. So it makes the cost of ownership a lot less, but your scalability factor is exponentially larger. So now you're putting the Sparks that can do full 4K, the 12G, the 4K HDMI, put those wherever you want to. We also have the mobile apps. So for Android and iPhone, you can turn your cellular phones into cameras and use NDI to bring that back. If you can't, utilize the live view stuff, there's a great way to add additional content in a non-traditional sense and still up that value of your production. So if you think about having cell phones on a sideline for camera sources, that in-game experience or that broadcast experience can really be enhanced very cost effectively in ways that people haven't really thought of, just to handle things differently. We have that capability, and we do play well with others, like Chris mentioned, with third-party companies. And NDI is so prevalent nowadays in a lot of different realms that opens up that ecosystem, that world of how can I interconnect different elements together. Also different verticals. Especially in a school environment where you've got some schools that are doing it for actual production, can also switch very quickly over to sports production. You've got other ways of bringing in content like with SRT, we can handle that as well. And yeah, we still want to pick on our buddies at LiveView because a lot of their stuff works out great with our gear, but there are times where curveballs get thrown. We're talking sports. Let's use a sports analogy. That signal's coming from where? How do we deal with this? Usually it's a last minute things. Remy Productions have this where, yeah, you might be using LiveView or something else for signal acquisition, but how are you going to get it from point A to point B, or retransmission? Yes, we're coming in locally. We've got LiveView stuff out in the field. We're doing the broadcast. We're switching it. Now from the TriCaster, where does it need to go? That's also where SRT can kind of help out and be that bridge, because now we can use SRT to send that output from one location to another as well. So it's a great way to then mix all different types of signals, different types of environments, all in one nice little cool ecosystem that is very scalable.
You bring up a great point with the remote productions, and I think what our friends at LiveView are doing is going to be a big part of that as we look to the future of what's going to be sports, because as sports open up this summer and next summer, I think, we're going to sort of change some of our production ideologies. On that note, we're going to answer a question by Rod. What is the ideal best practice? What is the best practice for IT backbone size moving to an all NDI broadcast house? So we are looking at probably you're going to have a good chunk of 10G in there. So I think that's going to be the starting point. When we're looking at, most NDI signals are actually designed to be around a 1 gig environment. So your average 4K camera can go on a 1 gig environment. Your TriCasters can go on a 1 gig environment. But with the 10 gig flexibility, I think you're going to start to see some improvements, both in working with an NRS and working with the TriCaster and 3Play 2 now. Those things will benefit from having 10 gig. So we're still designing NDI to be in most instances in 1 gig, but 10 gig is going to be important. And then there was some question about this was also, please mention how using non-Spark acquired NDI like a PC graphics machine will affect bandwidth. Okay, so there's a NDI bandwidth chart. And so if you're building your facility, I highly, highly recommend you reach out to the team at AVT. Morgan, Ashley, or any other tech guys can get you guys a good understanding. But NDI is pretty straightforward with respect to like, what's the video resolution we're trying to send and how much data will it be at most? So that you can sort of plan for that. And then there is a special cool piece of this that we keep explicitly on the TriCaster. So we're doing acquisition of NDI sources into our TriCaster. We can actually leverage a very small bandwidth version of the feed until the feed goes live. So that's an exclusive little piece that we have in TriCaster systems that if you're used to working with NDI with maybe a different organization and you're saying, well, hey, I'm actually, my bandwidth constraints are much larger than I would have thought because I can only get 4 signals in or something like that. But when you're working with a TriCaster, that will not be the case. We're always going to be able to get you in over the pipes what we say we can. So in the case of a TC2E, 32 inputs over 10G, that's possible even in 4K. So hopefully that gives you enough of an understanding, Rod, and we can certainly have a conversation deeper. Can we provide a deeper dive? Some anonymous attendee says, can we provide a deeper dive into the IO included with 3P2? Sure. Let me see if I can share a screen because I think I have this. Boom, share. Okay. Here's a production workflow, by the way, while we're talking about it. This is what we're looking at. And this is on the webpage, so nothing new here, but just like the overall design for what we see the future of replay. So you can have some cameras in SDI, you can have some cameras in the network, maybe some things hitting Sparks, PTZ cameras, phones, the ability to share playlists between your TriCaster and your 3Play, as well as getting the storage. And this is what we sort of see as like the future for this broadcast space in sports production. And then... okay, this is what the IO of the 3P2 is going to look like. So the physical IO is 4 SDI connections in. We have the ability to support 4K display with 2 1080 displays. This is very similar, familiar if anyone's seen the backplane of TC1. So it's going to feel very familiar to you there. And so this is the physical IO, but again, we do a lot of things in NDI and IP. So in IP, you'll be able to get a full 8 signals in. So if you needed to convert, let's say, more cameras, that's where these Sparks are going to come in handy. We got a couple of questions about this on launch about why we went this way. The truth is 4K is still the Wild West with respect to sports productions. You have with the NewTek customer base goes all the way down to phones. We have HDMI customers, we have SDI customers in 3G and 12G. So the idea was just rather than us build the box one way and then you sort of be locked into a given ecosystem, buy the right product that makes sense for your guys' production. And this way you can mix and match different products.
So there's a couple other questions that popped up here. Someone asked, how long will we be supporting the version 1, the Connect Spark HDMI? And if that's the one that's wireless, we stopped selling those a year or so ago. They're still around for support. I would definitely reach out if you have an issue regarding that. Talk to the dealer or talk to NewTek support about that. I answered this in chat, but it's still a good question. So with the 10 gig copper and the 1 gig copper network card in the unit, can we dedicate the 10 gig to receiving feeds as an input and the 1 gig to outputs? No, you cannot. There's no need because NDI is bidirectional. So the protocol allows for the traffic to flow kind of whatever they want to through the network. Now, we can talk about and go down this rabbit hole because we do it all the time, how to isolate and segment VLANs on a network switch. That's probably more of a better conversation to fully understand the point of that. But no, NDI is fully bidirectional. It's on the network. Devices are both sources and destinations simultaneously. And then also this might help with another question that we received about moving from an 8000 to a TC2. Yes, there is going to be a big paradigm shift, if you will, going from that chassis to an NDI-based platform in the network build out. That's what's key to understand. Isolated VLANs are your friends. I say this a lot. Dedicated network switches. Keep things off of regular data traffic because that's the first thing IT is going to freak out on when they say, hey, video's on our network. That's a lot of bandwidth. Start to peel back that onion layer a little bit and understand, okay, if you talk about NDI in a network, where do signals start from and where do they end up? So if you talk about camera sources, yes, you've got a dedicated feed from a camera back to a TriCaster. If you're talking about different elements, computer sources where you're doing PowerPoint sharing or editing, we have an amazing workflow with the Adobe Creative Suite that allows for that bidirectional nature from graphic standpoints for editing. All that can be on that network. But again, it's all about network deployment. That's the biggest problem with us old video engineer. Have to be IT guys now, but that's just the way the world is. So
I want to make this a little bit easier for Andrew in the sense that this is the question is always subjective. And Jeremy and I, it's very much about the minutia, but the short story is if you had cameras going into your TC8000, you just had 8 cameras and you're just going to swap it out for a TC2 Elite, initially there's no network impact. Direct SDI feeds are not going to change the networking. If you had 8 NDI cameras going to your TC8000 today and you got in a TC2 Elite tomorrow, there still would be no network differential because it's the same amount of IP traffic that you had. It's only when you start to look at getting deeper into what the TC2 Elite provides you that you start to say, oh, hey, we might want to go to this 10 gig route because we are going to expand the number of cameras, especially if I'm building out a larger facility. If I have an auditorium, different sports facilities, maybe I have a field and a gym that I want to cover, and I want to have cameras always at all those facilities, then now I start to say, hey, look, now what the TC2 Elite's doing is pretty slick. Again, in production, if we're only sending one feed ever out, we can actually put 16 channels over a single gigabit connection. So, we're giving you a lot of throughput on the TC2 Elite to sort of grow. And I think that would be my best way is you could get a TC2 Elite this summer, install it and keep a lot of the same workflow, but give yourself road to expand. And it's a similar concept with lots of things in NDI is that we continue to develop and expand and make the IP workflow better. None of this stuff is static, not even NDI. NDI continues to evolve and iterate, and we'll continue to do that. That is just what we do at NewTek. We always press the technology. So from an easy standpoint, just swapping out the 2 systems, no difference. It's only when we start to look at the future that we say, okay, hey, this is why you want to have a strong partner like one of our platinum partners like AVT is to say, okay, we got this system today because we had budget, but we want to do more with it. What does that look like? And that's when we can start to do the larger scale network and build out.
Another question about what's the IP stream limits on the unit. Well, that's talking about public internet. Your bandwidth on the connector is the bandwidth on the connector. So you got 10 gig pipe, you got a 10 gig pipe. Streaming out, that's a different question when it comes to what type of CDN is involved, how much upload and download speed you have with your service provider or things like that. We have 2 streaming encoders built into the TriCaster. That allows for different types of setup where you can have, one feed going to Facebook, one feed going to YouTube, or multiple feeds going to different YouTube pages. And you can pick and choose your resolution and bitrate settings depending on the upload speed that you have from facility up to the public internet. That's always going to be the case. A lot of facilities are finding out the hard way that their internet service provider is not giving them all the bandwidth they need. My church, we went through that where, we had our local Comcast feed, we had 200 down, but only 5 up. And we're like, hey, wait a minute here. That negatively impacts what we're trying to do from a streaming standpoint. So we have to adapt and figure that out. That's where the streaming encoder settings can help. If you've got screaming fast pipe and you've got a massive upload speed, figure it out. There's several different ways you can do this. I was just messing around. I had 8 uploads going once just because I had the pipe available to do so. That's not always going to be the case. And where you're streaming to will have their own set of rules of how big of a file you can actually stream. Most places you're not streaming live in 4K just because there's not the pipe to do so. And the CDN itself can't accept that signal coming in. They have limitations as well. So find out where you're sending that stream to, what's their minimum and maximum settings. I was dealing with this with the client yesterday via Facebook chat. One of my buddies online that was doing a remote sports production, and the CDN was choking him down to only 4 megabits. So it didn't matter what resolution he was going to pump. That was what's going to kill his speed. So that became the conversation of, oh, shoot, we can't do 1080p 60 now, even at 4 meg, because it's going to kill it. So now we got to work on a different way to handle the output. So yes, the TriCaster is capable of doing so, but you got to work all the way through the signal path, through the entire signal chain, and talk to the right people to understand what's my choke point is going to be.
Just for clarity here, we're talking about outbound streaming off of a TriCaster 2. None of this we're talking about is going to affect your NDI capability, which is mostly
Correct.
local. So those are two different concepts here. We talk about IP streaming. I'm sure these things get confusing. When we're leveraging NDI, that's all local network in some capacity. There's always opportunities to get things that sort of hop the local network or VLAN, stuff like that. That's not in this conversation about streaming out. So everything Jeremy said was just in that capacity. You'll still be able to get all your sources in via IP.
Right.
Speaking of which, we have someone talking about and they're talking about doing backhaul. So yeah, you're not going to need, it is unlikely that you're going to need to go over 10 gig for any of this stuff. It just doesn't, for the new tech stuff right now, we do not have anything pushing that fast. That said, NDI as a protocol can support very vast and many vast resolutions and different kinds of scales and shapes. So like the future for NDI is like, yeah, we'll just keep going and making more and more improvements, and eventually you'll be able to do, I don't know, something insane that doesn't exist right now. But today, anything going back to a TriCaster 2 or a 3Play 2, 10 gig is going to be more than enough.
Well, and also we need to talk about the differentiation between NDI and HX. So the 4K camera that's on me currently, that's our HX2 protocol. So
Same on me.
Right. And Chris has one too. So we're talking about 30 megabits on that side, where full bandwidth on 4K is going to be 230 or so. So you do have to understand what type of signal in the NDI realm you're dealing with. Full bandwidth, that's what it means. Full bandwidth, you're going to have more of the pipe taken up. But if you're just pushing camera sources around, you can get away with a lot of bit of bandwidth savings with minimal compression, differentiation there in the entire production. 2 network cards on a PC, one for NDI and a second for streaming. If you're, this comes down to VLAN provisioning more than anything, and subnets, because NDI, we utilize multiple TCP. So it's like water trying to find the best path through a network. Both ports are going to be active. That NDI traffic is going to want to flow through however it can. So if you segment the VLANs as far as what's going to the public internet versus your NDI network, that's where the benefit's going to be. So you can't go into the NIC on the PC and say, no, you're inbound, you're outbound. That's not going to work. That's not how the protocol is designed. So we don't deal with one-way traffic. So hopefully that makes
the bidirectional nature will. So NDI does this amazing thing to make your guys' life easy, and to Jeremy's point, it's going to be like water. It's going to find a way. And so what Jeremy's basically saying is, if you have 2 isolated network environments where there's no NDI path right from A to B, then yeah, you could technically plug two network jacks, one into one into the other, and you could do two things simultaneously. However, because we're talking about throughput into and out of a system, right? Your 1 gigabit connection, right? Your 1,000 kilobits. Jeremy was talking about streaming to like Facebook and YouTube before. The most that's going to be is 8 meg. You know, that's not realistically speaking, you're not pushing anything too crazy, whether in the field or in your own stable studio environments. And where that's going to sort of get impacted is if you do multiples. So a single NDI feed coming into a computer or generating out of a computer, well, if that's 1080, that's 150 meg on the high end. That's actually overshooting, like 125 meg at 1080-60 at most. So there's 125. And then you add another, let's just go crazy. You sent 2 8 meg streams out, 16. You have a lot of pipe left to do network processing. And I think to some of the questions about backbone and best practices, what Jeremy's bringing up, and this is very deep IT talk, I know we may be losing people here, is the short story. There's other people leveraging the network. And what you want to gain is both as flat of a network as possible, which means I want simple networking configuration. I want as many things into a given switch in a given facility. So all my networking is easy. Also, to sort of separate yourself. More often than not, your production needs are only your own. Although there is the NDI capacity to do all kinds of cool things in a facility, having your own chunk of the network that just does production work will save you guys a lot of headaches. And so these things can be established with VLANs or just having isolated networks. There's a lot of ways to approach that. And so we want to, if you start simpler and then you start to build up your NDI network, that'll probably be easier. If you just try to throw it on the existing, let's say, school network, you may find that the IT guys have some limitations in place that are counterintuitive to what we're trying to accomplish. And I think we want to make the point is like, hey, if you start simple, and this is why working with a great partner is important, is to say, what's the best way for us to move forward? Some college organizations take to NDI immediately. We give them the information and they're able to set up connectivity from field to production facility instantly. And they don't have any worries because they manage their IT network chain very well. And sometimes that's a bigger undertaking. And so we provide tons of documentation. AVT is knowledgeable, and the new tech team itself also has experts in IT and deployment. That way we can go and say, hey, this is the best path forward in our experience to get you guys where you need to go. So, you know, rely on us to sort of fill in the gaps, and we'll always make sure we get you where you need to go.
So we're coming up to the top of the hour. Ashley, do you have anything that you want to close us out with?
Yeah, I just I think we've answered all of the Q&A. They were coming in kind of quickly there. So thanks, guys. Great job. Again, if we have any other questions or there's anything that we need to follow up on after the fact, we'll be reaching out, and you have my contact information. So, you know, at this time, we just want to, you know, we're coming up on the hour here. So we want to just thank Jeremy and Chris and Scott for joining us. And I hope that this was beneficial for everyone. And like I said, we will be posting this online. We'll also be breaking it up into smaller sections in case there was a specific part that you want to tune into that. So at this time, I think we'll sign off and just, you know, just want to say a huge thanks to LiveU and NewTek.
Thank you, Ashley.
Thanks,
All right.
everyone.
Have a good day,
Thanks,
everyone.
Ashley.
Thanks.